Thank
Okay.
you.
So welcome to today's webinar. And the conversation is all about why do people misunderstand each other? Or, why is it when I have a conversation with somebody, come away, it's like, I don't think they really understood what they were saying, or that they didn't get me. And I sure don't know what's going on for them. And so the previous explanations was this is we didn't communicate properly, or we kind of didn't come from the same perspective or something like that. But there's actually a simpler, deeper explanation why we disconnect and why we don't see eye to eye, and why we don't, the communication isn't clear. And so I call it the psychology. I call it the physics of our psychology. And I broke it down into three elements. And it's interesting because Sydney Banks used to always say, there's really only one principle, but it's way easier to talk about it if we say there's three. So the first element, if you will, is the fact that we actually live in separate realities. And I know that we understand that people see things differently, or they may have different expectations or different opinions, but it goes way deeper than that, because we've understood that everybody's sort of looking at the same reality. It's coming to us, it's coming in through our eyeballs and our ears. And yes, we might be interpreting it differently, but we're seeing the same thing. But we actually don't see the same thing, because what we experience, or what we call our own reality, is very separate, because our reality is created from within ourselves. So rather than the mind working like a camera and we're collecting information from the outside world, essentially looking at the same thing, it works like a projector. And so when we have different thinking about something or different understanding of something, we actually have a different reality. It's almost like people are going around with their own virtual experience apparatus, with the, it's over their ears and over their eyes, and so if you can really understand that people never see the same things, they never hear the same things, and so it's like we can stop beating each other up about what's wrong with that person. They obviously can't see what I see, and besides, what I see is the right way. We don't see that our own experience of our own reality is sort of a virtual reality, and it's fluid and it's changing and always in flux. And so that's the biggest hurdle initially, is we think we're looking at the same thing, or we're understanding something the same way, or we're hearing it the same way, and this just doesn't work that way. So that's sort of the first element of what I call the physics of our psychology. The second major influence in our inability to kind of really connect and really have that deeper understanding is that our moods play a big part in this. So if I'm about to have a conversation with somebody and I'm feeling kind of nervous, or I'm anticipating what they might say or how they might react or what they might do, it's like I'm not in a really good place to actually have that conversation, because what's happening, I'm up in my head, imagining these outcomes, imagining, different scenarios. And so I'm actually not there. I'm actually not with the person. And the more I'm nervous or agitated or worried about it, the less we actually can see what's really going on. So it's like when we're in we call it like our glass elevator of understanding, or glass elevator consciousness. If we're in a low mood because we feel kind of worried about something, or nervous about having the conversation, it's like our elevator has gone down. So we don't have that same resourcefulness. We don't have that same ability to connect with somebody, to really understand more deeply about where they're coming from or what they're seeing. So that's another aspect of why we are, sometimes feel very disconnected, and their messages don't click. The third element is listening, and it's surprising how we think we're listening when we're not. I teach a model that was created by Mavis Karn. She's been teaching the principles for 40 plus years. And what she saw she created a model around the way we listen. And so the first way is really obvious. We call it distracted listening. Like we often think the distractions come from outside of ourselves, like somebody's coming to the room or, what have you. But most of the distraction is our own thinking. Like we're up on our heads, um, thinking about something I should have done. Gee, did I unplug the coffee pot? Or I've got got to get this conversation over with. I've got the report due. So rather than being able to hear the other person, we're actually listening to ourselves. So we're distracted by our own, um, maybe even we're wondering things like, what do they think of me? Or how am I doing here? Or, gee, I hope this goes well. And so all of that keeps us sort of out of the present moment and into our heads. So we're distracting ourselves essentially. And we can only listen to one thought at a time. And so what we're doing is mostly listening to our own thinking. The other way we listen is we call it evaluating. So as the person's talking, it's like, oh, I don't know if I really believe this, or I don't really think this is they've got it right. So, or another way that we evaluate is like, as soon as they stop talking, I'm going to tell them something. I've got the solution, I've got the answer. I'm going to point out where they're wrong. So again, we're not really listening to the other person. We're listening to our evaluation of what they're saying or who they are, or how they're showing up, or something like that. The third way we listen is it's tricky because it looks like we're paying attention. So we're actually often taught this in school, like pay attention, right? And memorize it and be able to, um, uh, give it back on the examination or recite it as something. But what they realized about this way of thinking, yes, we can pay attention and kind of collect the information, but we don't have understanding. Like there's no depth of understanding there. It's all very surface and all very kind of temporary. But the fourth way of listening is what Mavis called quiet listening. And this is like when we've got really nothing on it. I often use the metaphor of you're going to you're at home in your comfortable chair and there's just beautiful quiet music on the radio and you're just sitting there listening, and so you're very relaxed. There's nothing to do about it, and when we actually listening to another human being from that state of mind or that quiet mind, it's amazing how much more we understand, how much more we remember, how much more we kind of hear past what they're really saying. And when we listen from that place, people really feel heard and seen. Like it's this amazing gift that we have this ability to offer to another human being, that we're really there listening and with them. So, and when we go into a difficult conversation, sometimes they call it, or we're not really in that state of mind. We're up on our head, worried and agitated and what have you. So those are, I would say, are sort of the three elements or the three things that get in the way of being able to really be with somebody and hear what they're saying. So what's the solution? So again, three things. The first thing is what we call presence. And presence, I think everybody understands presence on a very simple level. Like you're there in your mind and your body. You're in the room and you're focusing on what the person is saying. Like you don't have a lot of, overthinking or whatever. You can be kind of with them. But what we're talking here is presence. It's like when we show up in the essence of who we are, this, the intelligence that we are, the if you want to call it, like having that loving presence with another human being, like that is such a powerful way to have any conversation with anybody. And also understanding that we have this innate wisdom, this innate intelligence, which will guide us through the conversation. Like we will know what to do in real time or what to say in real time, which would be, the best approach or the best response to that other person. The second element is connection. And, we talk a lot about connection. I felt really connected to that person or what have you. But what I see as connection is that we see through the behavior or the antics of that other person. Like we see them as a being of light and probably with lots of conditioned thinking. They've got their own stuff going on, their own beliefs, their own internal thinking, their own destructive thinking. But if we can see past that and see the truth of who they are, people feel that. They know that we're with them. They know that we see them, kind of beyond maybe their own nervousness or their own anticipation about the conversation. And so the third aspect of the solution is going back to this deep listening, um, and understanding that when somebody doesn't hear us, it's actually on us. Because if we're listening really deeply and really carefully without any agenda or any, you know, performance anxiety, we're going to respond to them in a way that really lands with them. It's like, oh, you heard me. Oh, you understood me. And when people come from that place or have that experience of you, like now they're open to listen. Now they're open to hear you. So the reason why we people feel disconnected is because they're never connected in the first place. People have come with their own agendas, their own thinking, their own worries, their own, fears. And so that really gets in the way of being able to have that that deep, insightful presence with another human being. And so the question is like, if we're in a conversation, even if it starts really well, how do we know when things are starting to go offside? Like, how can we tune into like, oh, this started off pretty good, but now it doesn't feel that way. It actually comes from us, from our own internal feeling state, if you want to. So if for me, if I start to feel impatient, or if I start to feel urgent, or if I start to think, oh, like I gotta try to get my point across, or I need to explain myself in a different way. So those are just little that's just a little feedback mechanism that let us know that we've lost that presence, lost that insightful listening, and lost that connection with that other person. So our feelings are the key. People often say that, oh, feelings aren't appropriate, they're not useful, they're not helpful. It's like that's the magic of our psychological system. We have this real time feedback mechanism that lets us know that we've gone from this amazing presence, this intelligence, this ability to really connect with somebody, and we've kind of just gone over to the rumple strips on the side of the road, when our thinking goes off into something that's maybe more judgmental or more, we're becoming more impatient with that person. So I'd love to pause there and just ask what, if anything, you heard from this or what you noticed from this.
Some of this I've heard before, uh, but certainly not all of it. And and it's interesting because a few times while you were talking, I found myself drifting and then going back and thinking, I just missed what she said here. And so I think from what you've said, there's a lot to unpack there and to consider because if you think about all the times that you don't connect with people or don't understand where they're coming from, or you have an actual misunderstanding, how often we're actually doing this is not listening, not hearing. And, and I often say that being present, the ability to be really and truly present cures, fixes just about everything in my life. And yeah, so this is just another aspect of that. You know, I had a conversation with a work colleague this morning because feeling very, I was feeling quite uncomfortable about how a meeting had just gone. And with some other people in the meeting, I thought, is it just me that's experiencing this disconnect and this, you know, things going kind of sideways? So I phoned him and we chatted. And it turned out he was feeling the same way, that we were experiencing the same concerns. Because quite often, sometimes when I hear things, because I'm quite sensitive to um, energy and what people are saying and so on, I also will think, oh, it's just you. You're just um, overly sensitive and, you know, making stuff up and, you know, um, yeah, instead of valuing my own, what I'm hearing or what I'm getting from what people are saying.
I was just on a call earlier this morning with one of my mentors, and he made that distinction between what we call being present, like, I'm in the room, but that presence is kind of takes it to, presence kind of gives it some life or some vitality. Because when we're in that place, it's a very welcoming um, state, and people will gravitate towards it because it's our true nature. It's who we already are, and so there's a tendency for for the other person we're having the conversation with, for their kind of their own mind to quiet down, to settle, and to you're kind of inviting them into that presence because of how you're showing up. And I've seen this a lot, that if somebody's really um, agitated or argumentative, if we just hold our own and stay with the this truth of who we are, they will automatically quiet down. Like they will settle too, and then you can have that conversation. And it's true, like you said, Denise, sometimes it takes like a callback, or can we talk about this again, or um but yeah, it's like when they get unsettled, or what have you, or their mood goes down, it's like, can you stay with you and stay with that, your capacity to be have that seeing beyond their behavior, and seeing how remarkable they are as a human being, and how they have cool insights and cool ideas themselves. If we can stay there, I think the conversation course corrects.
Yeah, I think this was a bit different in that the person I called wasn't the person that I was um, having the difficulties with. He was somebody else in the meeting. And I guess it was more, uh, I was questioning what I was hearing. Like,
Mm.
you know, was there an issue there, or was I overreacting to somebody else's? And so I called him to say, hey, I'm experiencing this and I'm hearing this. Um, and it was interesting that he experienced the same thing.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
yeah, because I guess, and maybe it's just on a completely different topic. Is I think I needed to, because I often question myself. Um, you know, question whether I should feel this way, or whether I have a right to say something about,
Okay.
hey, about what somebody just said.
Yeah, that's really common, isn't it? When we have an experience, and it's like, is my experience valid? Is my experience correct? Is my experience um kind of the truth of the situation. And it can be helpful to have conversations with other people who are in the room, because it's until we kind of learn to kind of trust ourselves and say, okay, so I was, something was going on for me about this, and I wondered how it was for other people. Um,
Right,
yeah,
right, exactly.
yeah,
And
yeah.
uh, so it was, yeah. And I guess maybe the thing is that, when you talk about there being misunderstandings, is to address it right then, which I didn't.
Mm,
And I, yeah, instead I just kind of cut down and and that's something that, yeah, would be helpful too, to when there is conversations and you think you are misunderstanding or you are not comfortable with what's being said, to say something in the moment. And sometimes in business situations that can be challenging for me anyway.
okay. Yeah, I think a couple of the things here is like, if we're experiencing some nervousness or whatever you want to call about the conversation, or my viewpoint is my reality just different than your reality, and and as soon as we're engaged in that, we're already distracted, right? Like we're already kind of not completely there. And I really like your idea of like just checking back, like, did I understand you correctly, or could you kind of take that by me one more time? Like, I think it can be done from a place of real respect and honor. Like, I'd really love to understand, where you're coming from or what you're seeing in this. And so I
Yeah,
always think that the invitation to it's almost like starting the conversation anew. It's like, can we just, can we just have another look at this? Um, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. There's a few things that were going on in that conversation,
Mm,
but it was a good, in a way, it was a really good experience for me because I learned to trust myself more and to um, realize that just because this person said something should be this way, it doesn't have to be that way. That, um, yeah,
this whole thing about separate realities is really tricky, because we can appreciate that somebody else sees something differently than we do or understands something differently, but sometimes we don't recognize it in ourselves. Because like if we have an impression or something or experience of something that we think, well, that's that's the real thing, that's what really is happening out there. And if we don't see that that's always fluid too, it's like, yeah, this is my truth in this moment, this is my reality in this moment. So not getting too fixated on that, we're right or wrong, or this is the right way or the wrong way to see this. It's like almost being willing to be curious about what as curious where we're coming from, as curious as they're coming from, because we're always seeing things through the lens of our own thinking, our own beliefs, our own assumptions, and so we can, like reigniting the conversation can help us kind of clear the Sydney Banks called them the scratches on the window, so we could see things with more clarity too, in having continuing the conversation with the other person. So now you're both exploring together.
right, right. Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. And, and And I tend sometimes to not to be afraid to be direct with someone. And so sometimes I'll, go sideways around the issue to get an answer. And I just think it's better to and realize he said to me once, say what you have to say. Um, say it clearly or something like that, and take what you get. Like don't try and turn it in, like spend all this time dancing around the issue or whatever it is you have to say. Just say what you have to say
Mm.
now and take what you get, and don't go creating sort of stories about all of it beforehand.
Yeah, I think a piece of that too is like where we're coming from. Like if we're coming from it with like I mentioned earlier, like respect for the other person, appreciation for the other person. I'm just not seeing what you're seeing. I don't get what you're saying here. That's a lot different than making the other person bad and wrong because they're off base or they don't get it or right. So when we come with that welcoming energy, and people will respond to that, I think, in a positive way. It's like, oh well, well, this is how I see it, or this is what I'm thinking, or because arguments are basically two people who have kind of locked in to their own opinion, their own viewpoint, and 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 believing that if they argue long enough or loud enough, they can convince the other person to see it their way.
Right. Yeah. No, yeah, exactly. It's about winning. It's not about
Mm. Mm. Good point. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
which I've been in many of those conversations myself, and I had many people do that, and yeah, it's not about sharing your thoughts or your opinion. It's about persuading the other people to have the same opinion. And
Right. Right.
yeah, and yeah, I do have to say that one thing. I'm usually willing to listen to other people's um, opinions and thoughts and consider them. I think I'm pretty good at that. Um, I think sometimes though that I might too easily give up my opinion to agree with them, maybe as a, I don't know, people pleasing thing or something. But yeah, and then I read this interesting thing um, online yesterday, and it involved a couple of people who were, I think, Hollywood movie stars or something. And one of them was very, I can't remember what the context was, but this woman was very angry and opinionated about a certain thing, and sort of went on to this big rant about it at length, while the person she was ranting at just sat there and no expression, no, just sat there and listened and waited till she was done, didn't try to interrupt. And when she was done, he briefly said his piece without, getting personal or raising his voice or, getting emotional about it, and then just sat back and just, it was really interesting. I wish I'd kept it or
Mm.
pinned it or something, but just, yeah, just said what he thought and or believed and then just sat back.
Right.
Yeah, which is, I think very powerful.
Yes.
Yeah,
When we really see that we live in these separate realities and have these very different experiences of life, that is so real to that individual. There's no there's no place to talk them out of it or argue with them, and just having that presence of mind to be patient with that person or to just give them some space to rant or vent is
yeah,
because it, if you try to intervene, it'll just escalate, right? Yeah, it'll start to blow up into something bigger. And when I found too, after I'd been immersed in this understanding for a little while, I noticed I didn't express my opinions quite so often. I was more available to hear other people's thinking about something, their viewpoint, without the urge to kind of give them my perspective or my point of view or my belief around something. And I just found it's just kind of, I just felt more peaceful. It wasn't my job to get them to see it the way I see it or get them to see it another way. It's just kind of letting people be in their the experience of their own life, and uh and knowing that they're okay.
yeah. Well,
There's nothing that needs to change. Yeah.
yeah, I had coffee with somebody last week who does that. He said, I don't have to share my opinion with people. They can, you know, they don't need to know how I feel about things. They can share their opinion away or, and talk away. And he said, I don't have to do anything. I can just be there. They don't need
Right.
to know I like them or don't like them or don't value them or, you know, excuse me.
Well,
And
people will know that in instinctively by your presence.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, what, that they don't like them or something like that, you mean?
We can feel judgment. Like everybody's got that capacity to know when there's
I,
something is coming, that judgmental thinking is present. Yeah.
you know, I don't know with this guy if they could. I think um, I think he's solid enough in himself that he's just kind of neutral. He doesn't, he's very quiet. He's very, just more of an observer. And yeah, doesn't feel he needs to impose his thoughts on anyone else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's no
Yeah. Yeah.
patient, like, you know, uh, yeah, he's just there, just, yeah. Um, but he's been working on that for a long time, like many, many, many decades. Uh, so
Well, it's our I always say our essence or our default state or kind of our truth of our being is that presence. It
right,
is that capacity to kind of hold that person in high regard and see the best in them and wish for the best of them. That's kind of how we're made as a human being.
yeah,
But then we can also get up in our opinions, our insecure thinking, our judgment of ourselves, or like that's like we can go there too.
right,
And that's always a temporary experience. It comes and goes. We're in it. We're back home with ourselves again. Um, and so that the essence of this um, conversation is that we can appreciate the value of that presence in any conversation or interaction, because it'll go a long way to um, hearing the other person's perspective and sharing, and then having them open to our perspective because they feel heard and seen.
right, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he really, it's interesting. He doesn't really feel he needs to share his perspective. It's just, yeah, he's if he's asked, he will.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, but it
Yep.
doesn't feel the need to, you know, um, get it out there and have it known, so
Right.
to speak,
Right.
which I think is really quite beautiful.
Mm, yeah. And when we appreciate too, everybody has their own deeper wisdom, their own deep intelligence, their own GPS system or whatever you want to call it. They don't
Yeah,
really need our opinion. Not really. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 So, um, yeah. Um, I think I'm probably going to need to go in a couple of minutes
Okay,
because I
that's all right. We can, I'll
got
just say thank you for attending. I'm going to stop the recording and